Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Creamy Cod and Potato Gratin. That's right, I got a food wish for a classic cream cod recently, which by the way was one of my childhood favorites. But instead of doing the traditional version, I decided I would try to make it a little bit fancier, or as we say in the business, more refined, and present basically all the same ingredients, except in an individually sized, beautifully browned and bubbly gratin form. And not to spoil the ending, but I was very happy with how this came out. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making some mashed potatoes. And what I have here are 2 peeled and quartered russets, which of course is the official potato of mashed potatoes. And as usual, we'll want to make sure we add a generous amount of salt to the water, at which point we'll bring that up to a boil, and then adjust our heat to maintain a nice steady but gentle simmer. And we will cook this until our potatoes are perfectly tender. And while that's happening, we can go ahead and pull together the rest of our ingredients, which will include some finely diced shallots, which by the way every store has nowadays. We will also need some freshly chopped tarragon, which as you know is my favorite seafood herb. We will also need a little bit of lemon zest, along with some of the freshly squeezed juice. And of course we can't make creamy cod without cream. Right, that's just cod. Speaking of which, I have about a pound of Pacific cod, which is skinless and boneless. And one of the reasons I was pointing to everything with a knife is because what we'll do here before we start is cut this fish into like 2-inch size pieces, cutting across the fillet as shown. And what that's going to do is help it cook a little more evenly and maybe faster. Plus, I think it's going to look nicer. And by the way, don't cut on a plate with a knife. Use a cutting board. Alright, sometimes I take a few shortcuts when I'm filming that I would not recommend for the non-filmer. But anyway, that aside, while our potatoes are cooking, we can get the rest of our ingredients together. At which point we'll head back to the stove to see if they're done, which of course we'll test by giving them the old poka. And while we don't want these collapsing and falling apart, that knife should slide in with virtually no effort. And that's it. Once those are cooked, we can go ahead and drain them. And not to brag, but I am a really fast drainer. Check it out. And then to our potatoes we will add a little bit of cayenne, a nice big pinch of salt, and about 2 tablespoons of butter per potato. At which point we'll go ahead and give these a nice mashing until they're as smooth as we can get them. And other than giving these a quick taste for salt, our mashed potato component is done. And if you're wondering what happened to the milk or the cream or the buttermilk, well, you know what? We don't want to add that stuff here. All right, we just want potato and butter. Reason being, this is going to get covered with a very rich cream sauce. And as you'll see, we're going to be fine in that area later when we serve this up. And then what we'll do once we're happy with how our potatoes look, feel, and taste is transfer some into the bottom of some lightly buttered baking dishes. Oh, and we definitely want to use a pan under these dishes, since there's a 100% chance these bubble over. And once we transfer that in, we'll kind of smooth it out and make a little bit of a well in the center. And while you can put in as much potato as you want, remember we still have to fit in our fish and our cream sauce. And yes, of course you can do this in one big casserole dish. And I should mention, 1 big potato is probably enough for 2 portions. So yes, what I'm trying to say is I did make extra mashed potatoes, which very well may appear as potato pancakes tomorrow morning. But anyway, once that's set, we can head back to the stove to prep our sauce and fish, which we'll start by melting some butter over medium-high heat, to which we will add our shallots, along with a nice pinch of salt. And what we'll do is saute these stirring for about 3 or 4 minutes, or until our shallots just start to turn golden. And the reason we don't want to brown these is because brown shallots are sweet shallots, and we do not want these to become too sweet. Alright, the cream we're going to use is already kind of rich and sweet, so to me the flavor of caramelized shallots will not work in this too well. So as soon as they look a little something like this, we'll go ahead and dump in our cream, which will of course stop the browning process. We can also go ahead and toss in our lemon zest, as well as maybe another shake of cayenne, and 1 more pinch of salt. And we'll bring this up to a boil still on medium-high. And please be careful. Cream loves to boil over, so make sure you keep an eye on it. And then what we'll do once our cream is boiling enthusiastically is go ahead and carefully transfer in our pieces of cod, which we are only going to cook for about 2 minutes. Okay, so toss it in and toss it around and give it a little basting. And as I mentioned earlier, the cutting of the fish is optional. Or if you have 2 fairly equally sized fillets, you can try to use the whole piece. But when buying cod, it can be very tough to find 2 pieces exactly the same size and shape, which is why I do recommend cutting it up and serving it this way. Plus, I just think it looks cooler. And then after simmering in that sauce for about a minute, we can go ahead and flip those pieces over. And we will let it simmer in that cream for another minute, at which point we're going to do 2 things. we are going to stir in our freshly squeezed lemon juice. But very important, we're also going to turn off the heat. All right, so the flame goes off and we're going to stir in our lemon. And no, we are not cooking it through at this point. We are just giving it a head start, as well as flavoring our sauce. Which is why after about 30 seconds of stirring that lemon in, we're going to remove that from the stove. And then divide our pieces of fish evenly over the top of our potatoes. And of course, make sure you're mixing and matching big and small pieces. All right, don't put all the big ones in one and all the small ones in another. Not only would that be weird, but your two portions are not going to cook evenly. And then besides portioning the fish, we will also spoon over about half the sauce in the pan, which is only going to be phase one of the saucing. Because once we've done like 2 or 3 spoons of the sauce over each one, we are going to head back over to the stove and place this back over medium-high heat. And we're going to bring it up to a boil. Oh, and keep an eye on the sides. As this comes up to temp, if some of that cream starts to caramelize onto the edges, just go ahead and scrape it down and stir it in. And you'll see as this starts to boil, it's going to thicken up rapidly, which is exactly what we're trying to do. And as soon as your cream thickens up and looks like this, what we'll do is turn off the heat and quickly stir in our tarragon. And yes, of course, if you want to use another fish-friendly herb like dill, go for it. I mean, you are after all the Sweeney Todd of your cream cod. But while any herb will work, for me the most killer version is one done with tarragon. All right, I just think that flavor pairs the best. And that's it. As soon as that's stirred in, we can go ahead and top our cod with sauce part 2. And what I was thinking here is that thinner sauce would attach itself to the potatoes and kind of get absorbed in. And then this much thicker tarragon-infused cream would sort of stick to and stay on top of the fish. And then for one final touch, a very, very light dusting of Parmesan cheese. Oh yeah, the real stuff, Parmigiano Reggiano. And I meant a light dusting. This is not supposed to taste cheesy. We're just adding a little extra touch of savoriness. Not to mention it's going to help this brown even more beautifully. And that's it. These are now ready to transfer into the center of a 450-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes, or until our fish is cooked through and everything's beautifully browned and bubbly, and hopefully looks like this. And if you want severe burns on your tongue, go ahead and dig right in. But I highly recommend you let these sit for about 5 minutes before carefully transferring that onto a plate. And yes, this is every bit as rich as it looks, so if at all possible, try to serve a nice big green salad with this. But anyway, I let mine cool down a little bit, and then grab a spoon and dug right in. And even though I really do love classic cream cod, I have to say, as far as an eating experience goes, I really do think this is superior. Alright, there are very few things that won't benefit from being browned in a hot oven. And while I really do love the cod component in this dish, and how beautiful it is in that rich, creamy, herbaceous sauce, which is brightened up with that little bit of lemon, what I actually love most about this are those mashed potatoes underneath, which even though they started off plain, have now soaked in that sauce, and have magically turned into some of the best mashed potatoes you will ever have. But anyway, that's it. What I'm calling creamy cod and potato gratin. If you like basic, more traditional creamy cod, I'm pretty sure you're going to love this. And while I really do think it looks great in these individual sized baking dishes, if you're making it for a larger group and don't have enough of those, you can just do everything in one larger pan. Right, just scale it up and it should work just about the same. But whether you go banquet style or make it like this, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.